Hi, I'm Zach Spader with Cornerstone Solutions. One of the great things about using Zoho products is that they all integrate together very well. But sometimes the built-in integrations don't do exactly what you want them to do, or you need to connect to a third-party app outside the Zoho ecosystem. In that case, Zoho has a product called Zoho Flow that you can use to build your own integrations. Let's take a look at how it works and build a sample flow. For demonstration purposes today, I've created a little newsletter form. It's a very basic form created using Zoho Forms. It asks for a first and a last name, an email address, and then there's a checkbox that they opt in to receiving the monthly newsletter. This form is built using Zoho Forms, and I have it integrated right now with Zoho Campaigns. And you can only integrate a form with a single application. So because I have it integrated with Zoho Campaigns, I can't also have it integrated with the CRM. But what I want to do is I want to notate in the CRM whether this person filling out this form has opted into the newsletter or not. So we need to check the CRM to see if that person's already in the CRM. And if they are, we need to check that newsletter box on their record. Now I've created a field in the CRM for the newsletter, and I created it in both the leads and the contacts module. And so I don't know when this person fills out the form, whether they're a lead in my system or they're a contact. And so I need to check both of those modules. If they're not in either one of those modules, then I need to create a new lead for them. If they are in one of those modules, then I need to update that module and check this box in the newsletter form. So I'm going to use Zoho Flow to do that today. Let's take a look at how that's going to work. Okay, so I'm in Zoho Flow. I'm going to go ahead and create a new flow. And I'm going to give it a name. It's going to give me a basic tutorial here of how the program works. I'm just going to go ahead and skip this. And I'm going to go right into the builder here. So I'm going to go to the app and configure this. Now, we're going to use an app to trigger this, but you can also trigger based on a schedule or a webhook. So if you want to have a flow that runs on a daily basis or a weekly basis, or you want to trigger it from another application via a webhook, you can also do this. But this initial screen here is what are we using to trigger the flow? And so we're going to use an app. So I'm going to go ahead and hit configure. And then I'm going to choose the app that I want to use to trigger this. So in this case, it's going to be Zoho Forms. Okay, so then we have a couple of options here. It looks like there's an old version of the entry submitted or a new version of the entry submitted. We're going to, of course, use the new version. Okay, and then the next step is to build a connection with that application. So I'm just going to click connect here. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Zoho Forms. Okay, and then this part is kind of important. Most times I just use all triggers and actions, and that way you can reuse this connection over and over and over again if you ever need to connect to Zoho Forms again. There's also an option to choose only specific triggers and actions, in which case you can limit the connection to a certain trigger or a certain action. This could be used for security purposes if you have to deal with HIPAA compliance or some other compliance that you would want to limit the connection that this has with your application. But for my purposes, I'm just going to choose all actions and triggers. And I'll authorize that. Okay. Once I've authorized that connection, then it's going to ask me to select the form that I want to use. And in this case, I only have one form in my account, it's the newsletter form. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. I also have the ability to add in additional filter criteria. If there's certain records that are submitted that I want to filter out, I can use this filter criteria here to denote which records those are that I want to filter out of this rule. I'm not going to put any filters though into this. Okay, so we've got our trigger set here. The next thing that we want to do when this fires off, we want to go into the system and look to see if the person has a lead or a contact record in the CRM. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the left-hand side under apps, and I'm going to search for the CRM. And you can see we've got a number of different CRMs that pop up. I'm going to choose Zoho. And then I have all the actions that I can choose. And so the first thing that I want to do is I want to fetch the lead. So I'm going to choose the fetch lead. I'm going to drop this in here. Okay, and again, it's asking us to form a connection with CRM. We haven't formed a connection with the CRM yet. So I'm just going to name this Zoho CRM. And again, I'm just going to choose all triggers and actions. That way I can reuse this over and over again. So now on my fetch lead, it's asking me how I want to search for the lead in the CRM. And in this particular case, when they fill out the form, they put in their email address. So I'm going to use the email address to search for the record. Email addresses are unique to a person. And so that's a unique point of data that I can use to search this module. So I'm going to put my cursor in the email field here. And then I'm going to go over to my form submission on the right-hand side. I'm going to drop that down. And I'm going to choose email. And it's going to put this little merge tag here in the email. So when this fires, it's going to grab the email from the form and it's going to search the lead record or the lead records in the CRM for that email address. Okay, once that fires, then I need to know whether or not it was successful in fetching the lead. Did it find a lead or did it not find a lead? So I'm going to put a decision in, and I'm going to go over here to this logic tab up on the top, and I'm going to set a decision. I'm going to drop that in here next. And I'm going to look for the lead ID. Because I didn't specify a lead ID coming from the form, I used the email address. If the fetch finds a record, it will have an ID. And if it doesn't find a record, there won't be an ID present. And so what I'm going to do in my decision here is I'm going to say, if the lead ID is not null, meaning that it found a record and it has a lead ID. Okay, so this is the condition, and we know that this is that it found a record. I'm going to rename this so that I know exactly what it is. So this decision here is that it found a lead. And I'm also going to rename this decision here just so I know exactly what it's doing. Okay, and then if it searches and it doesn't find a lead, if it is null, the lead ID, then I want it to search the contact record. So I'm going to go back over here to apps. I'm going to go back to the fetches here, and I'm going to fetch contact. And again, how do I want to search for this, the contact in the system? Again, I'm going to use the email. And so I'm going to go back here to email, make sure I'm going to the form submission, not going to the fetch lead to grab the email, but going to the form submission because I know that in the form, they're going to fill out their email address. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put another decision in because I don't know whether it's going to find or contact or not. So I'm going to go back over here to logic and I'm going to grab another decision. I'm going to drop it down here. So in this particular case, I'm going to search for the contact ID. Does it have a contact ID? Did it find a contact? And again, we're going to say contact ID is not null, meaning that it found a contact. I'm going to rename these again. Okay, so we've checked for a lead, we've checked for a contact. If neither one of those are found, then we want to create a new lead in the system. So I'm going to go back over here to the apps, and we're going to choose create module entry. I'm going to drop that down here. So if none of those conditions are met, if it doesn't find a lead, doesn't find a contact, it's going to create a new lead record. So we choose the module that we want to create the record for. So I'm going to choose leads. And the only information that I have is the first, last name, the email address, and then we're going to auto check the newsletter here. So I'm going to go into the first name field. I'm going to go back to my form entry submission over here on the side, and I'm going to choose first name. I'm going to put my cursor in the last name, choose last name. Scroll down here a bit. I'm going to go email address, put the email address in. And then for the newsletter is a checkbox. And so it's going to come over as either true or false. And so we're going to put this cursor in the newsletter here and put the checkbox, I would like to receive your monthly newsletter. Okay, so that should put true or false in this field here. Okay, and that's all the information that we have. So I'm going to click done. Okay, so we're almost done here, but we have two decisions. We have check for lead, check for contact, and we've assumed this far that we're not going to find a lead and we're not going to find a contact, so we created a new lead in the system. But what if it finds a lead that's already in the system, or it finds a contact? And so in this particular case, what we want to do is we want to update the module entries. So I'm going to scroll down here in the CRM options, and I'm going to grab update module entry. And I'm going to drop this in. When I hover over the decision box, I can see that it automatically connects this to what happens if I find a lead in the system, what happens if it matches that criteria. So again, this first one is for leads. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the leads module. Now, in this particular case, what we're doing here is what happens when we found a lead. And so now I have the lead ID. I have a lead in the system that the flow found. And so I now have a lead ID that I got from this fetch. And so I'm going to select the fetch over here on the right-hand side, and I'm going to scroll down here to the lead ID. And in this case, because this is a multi-purpose update, it can update any module. It just says entry ID, but this is where I'm going to put my lead ID in. So I'm going to select the lead ID. And then the field that I want to update, the only thing that I really need, if the record is already in the system, I only really need the newsletter field to update. So then I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to go back to the form entry, and I'm going to map over this field that says, I would like to receive your monthly newsletter, because this is a checkbox. It's a checkbox in the CRM. So we're going to go ahead and check this. And now we need to do the same thing for the contact record. We're going to create a new, or we're going to update the lead entry. If we find a lead, we need to update the contact module if we find a contact. So again, we're going to choose update module entry. We're going to drag it over the decision box, and you can see that it automatically connects. This time we're going to choose contacts. And again, we have the entry ID. This, we're going to choose the fetch contact. So if it finds a contact in the fetch contact, we're going to have an ID. And so this is the contact ID. So I put my cursor on entry ID, contact ID, and then I'm going to go down here, and I have the newsletter field. I'm going to go back up here to the form submission and map over the newsletter field. Okay, so we're done. We've built all of our flow here. There's a form submission. It goes into the CRM. It tries to look for a lead. If it finds one, it updates the entry. If it doesn't find one, it searches for a contact. If it finds a contact, it updates the module entry. If it doesn't find a contact, it goes back and it creates a lead in the system and fills in those fields that we have and checks the newsletter box. Okay, so now we want to test this to see if it's actually working. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to press the play button up here to test and debug. It'll tell me if there's any big issues with it. It says that it's made connection. That doesn't really tell me that it's going to work. It just tells me that it's connected to both of those applications. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn the flow on. Okay, now that that's turned on, it's all ready to go. So I'm going to go over to my form, and I'm going to submit an entry, and we're going to see if this works. Okay, so I had gone ahead and submitted the form, and I had a couple of failures. And so that's a good thing to show, is what happens when there's a failure of the flow. So I had submitted it the first time. I had come over here to Zoho Flow, and you can click on the history tab up here at the top, and it shows you whether or not your flow was successful or it failed. And so the first one here that I completed, I can click on that. What was happening is that I was submitting the form with a lead that was already in CRM. So I knew that it was going to find the lead, and then it should update the lead module. But what was happening was, on the lead module update, it was erroring out, and it was giving me an error that says the expected value for the checkbox field, or the Boolean field, is the Boolean type. And typically that is true or false. Sometimes it's the number 1 or 0, depending on the Zoho application. You can use 1 or 0 as well as true or false. And so I was in this particular instance on this test, I was just simply passing over the value from the field that was in forms. So then I tried it with the 1 or the 0. It failed as well, gave me the same error message. Expected type is Boolean. So then I went back and I tried manually putting the word true in the field, because I knew that if the form was submitted, that value was always going to be true. So instead of just passing the merge tag for the field, I just typed in the value true. That didn't work either. You can see here that the value that's being passed over, in this case for the newsletter field, I was just typing in the word true. Again, it wasn't accepting that. Should accept that value. So I did a little research and I found that the way that you need to input that for a Boolean field is a special little script that you have to put in for the true. So in this particular case, I had to enter the $ and then an open bracket, true, close bracket. And so this is the format that the CRM is expecting to receive that in. And so I changed that in both the lead module update and the contact module update. And then when I ran it the 4th time, it succeeded. And so in this particular case, it found the lead and it updated the lead entry in the system. If I go over here to this lead entry, you can see that the newsletter box is checked. So our flow worked properly. The next thing that I want to test is what happens if we submit a response that is not in the CRM. And so I'm going to go ahead and click add another response. So I'm going to use a different name. I can hit submit. Okay, I can go back over here to Zoho Flow and I can go to the history of my flow. And I can see that right now, this particular one is queued. That means it's working, it's going through the process. So I can see that it's recorded that there's a new submission. So we're just waiting now until the flow completes. Okay, so the flow failed again. So I had forgot to go in and change the values for true on what happens if it does find or doesn't find a record and has to create a new record. So it failed down here in the module entry and gave me the same result here that the type needs to be Boolean. So we know exactly what that is. We just need to go over to the builder and down at the bottom of our flow where it creates the new lead, I just need to change that here as well. So here's the newsletter field. We're just going to paste that true little script value in here and click done. We're going to apply the changes. Make sure our flow is on. Go back over here to the form. I'm going to add another response real quick. And submit. We'll go back over to flow and we'll look at the history. Okay, and we can see that it is queued again. And we'll just wait a couple seconds, make sure that that completed successfully. Okay, so the changes that we made were successful and it completed. And so we can see that there was a new module entry created. So if we go back to our CRM now, we should have a new module entry for Jane. And we do. And we can see that we have first name, last name, and the newsletter button is checked. So we've created a flow. We had a little issue that we had to solve with trying to connect multiple applications to a form. Normally you can only connect one. So we use Zoho Flow to solve that issue. You can see that when you're building these flows, a lot of times it's a lot of trial and error. Sometimes there's some little ins and outs of how you have to put the data in. You have to do a lot of testing. But as you start to build more and more flows, you get more and more confident with it. You start to learn these little tips and tricks. And then the next time you build a flow, you know that you have to have a little script to put the word true into a Boolean field. And so it's just kind of trial and error. But that's the basic building of how you use flow. Hope you found this video helpful.
If you found this video helpful, be sure to like it and leave us a comment. You can also subscribe to our channel and click the bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. If you want to learn more about Zoho or would like help with anything Zoho related, head on over to our website at zcrmhelp.com to connect with us. Thanks for watching.